Okay, there we go. It's recording now. So last time we looked at the external assessment, right? Um, and part of our, strategy audit is to look at both the external as well as the internal assessment. Um, so today we're going to look at the internal assessments and see what that entails and how to go about doing the internal assessments. Okay, so let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So moving on from the external assessment, next thing we want to do is the internal assessment. It depends really on you, on how you want to do this. There's no right way, there's no wrong way of doing it. Some people will go and do the internal assessment first, and some people will do the external assessment first. Again, it's totally up to you and the situation that you're in. Um, a lot of the consultancy projects that I'm called to do, um, I will go and look at the company itself and see what is the problem, what are they trying to achieve, and based on that, I will choose to go for either internal assessment first or the external assessment first. I will also look at other things like, what is available to me. Obviously, during the pandemic, things have become more complicated. So sometimes getting access to people or physically going to companies becomes a bit of a challenge. So then I'll see whatever information is available to me. I'll start from that point forward. So it really, depends on you, what information and resources you have available, and what sort of, you know, company you're dealing with, what problems they're trying to solve, or what opportunities are they trying to, um, you know, um, achieve in that particular organization. So the internal assessment basically is about identifying the strengths and weaknesses inside our company. So the key difference, obviously, internal versus external. The internal are those things that we can control ourselves. External, as we talked about earlier, are those things which we cannot control ourselves. So within that, there's a number of key areas we have to look at. So management itself, the marketing, finance and accounting, production operations, research and development, and the MIS itself. Um, so we have to look at the strengths and weaknesses in all of these things. Yes, even though we were talking about marketing and how marketing strategy was impact, but marketing strategy is impacted by all of these things. And I'll talk about some of these, how they impact our marketing strategy. So the nature of the internal audit is the basis for objectives and our strategies. Whatever strategies that we're going to develop for an organization is going to be based on the internal strengths and weaknesses of our organization. It is also going to be based on the external opportunities and threats. And obviously, a company needs to have a clear statement of mission or the mission statement. What is the purpose of its existence? Usually, most of the big companies I work with, they have a clear mission statement. Um, Oftentimes, some of the small and medium enterprises I work with, they do not have this clear mission statement. That is a thing that is missing in a lot of the smaller companies. So that's something that sometimes we have to work with the smaller companies to help them develop. But the large companies, generally speaking, will have a clear cut, mission statement available for us to look at. We want to look at the distinctive competencies of a company. What makes us different? What are the things that we are good at? The first strengths that cannot be easily matched or imitated by competitors. So these competencies have to be things which are unique to us and things that are going to be very difficult for others to copy as opposed to things that can be easily copied. So when we're looking at the internal factors, one of the main things is to look at, hey, what are the things we're good at? And those things could come from any one of these factors here. It could be management, it could be marketing, it could be within finance and accounting, production operations, research and development, uh, or the MIS or the IT systems, as we call it now. Um, so there are parallel processes of the external audit, information gathered from management, marketing, finance, accounting, production, et cetera, et cetera. Again, like I said earlier, it depends on how we do this. You could do these things in parallel, do the external and internal together, or you could do it step by step, or you could do it based on the organization that you're working with. But these things have to be done before we can go and create those long-term strategies for any organization. So the internal audit, when we look at it from the manager's perspective, so we look at who the managers are and the employees, and we go to them and we say, you know what, we need your information, we need your input. Oftentimes, or one of the ways you can do this is to get a team of managers, which will come up with 10 to 15 key organizational strengths and weaknesses to focus on. And usually that team of managers will be across the board from all parts of the organization. It's not going to be limited to one particular department only. Let me give you an example. So right now, my wife is working for an American firm. And this American firm, basically what they do is they've got this new type of schooling system. And they're implementing this new type of schooling system across the board in many states in the US and Canada as well. So for this organization to succeed, they need to have the right people in place. The CEO, he came and he talked to them. I think this was like before Christmas. And he was like, look, for us to succeed, we need to have the right people in place. And consequently, he told the HR department, you guys are the most important people in the organization. So the HR in this particular case becomes the most important strength for this company, because they're the ones who are going out and finding the right employees who can go and work in the schools and the districts that they're working with. So HR becomes that key factor for that particular company because they're working with schools. Another example is with Zara, the clothing company. We might have talked about this earlier, I don't remember, but what Zara does is, for them to be number one, they have an amazing supply chain system. And that supply chain system allows them to bring the latest clothes into their stores in the shortest period of time. So if you look at, as an example, Marks and Spencer's, big British brand, they take almost a year before they can take those clothes from the catwalk, the Paris Fashion Week, the Milan Fashion Week, et cetera, and bring them to their stores. It takes 1 year. A lot of other companies like H&M and Next and brands of that sort will take 3 to 6 months. Zara does it in a few weeks, literally a few weeks. So less than a month, you can have those things you see on the catwalk, on a Paris or London Fashion Week, they can be in Zara stores. And how have they done it? Is through their supply chain management, because their supply chain is really, really awesome. So essentially, these managers will come and sit down and tell us, what are the strengths, what are the things we can focus on, should be from all walks of life, all parts of the organization, not just one particular department. So even though we might be making marketing strategy, for example, that does not mean we should limit this to the marketing managers. It should be everyone in the organization should be contributing to this. One of the things we look at is the finance, because the money is, it's an important factor, especially, in this day and age when we see a lot of companies are going bust, companies are going bankrupt. It's money factor that is keeping those companies alive, the ones that are still going. So I'm not going to go in too much depth with financial ratio analysis because there's a whole course on financial management. And you learn a lot about finance through that course. But what we will look at is financial, what are the key financial things? And we'll talk about that a bit later down the line. But we want to look at how strong is the company, financially. Um, so if the company is strong financially, that becomes our strength. If the company is not strong financially, that becomes our weakness. Another key factor is the organizational culture. What's a culture of an organization? I think we talked about this briefly earlier, but welcome, Debbie. Any idea what's an organizational culture? Or Alia, you can go ahead also. Organizational culture.
It's like the behavior, maybe the rules, the within the organization, the standards they should follow to carry out the organization and the behavior and
That's right.
yeah.
So sometimes there could be written rules, sometimes there could be unwritten rules about the company. So it's like how people in the organization, they work, they behave, um, anything from basic things like dressing to the way how we communicate with our peers. Are we using, for example, WhatsApp to communicate with each other, or are we going to use emails? Are we going to make phone calls? They might not be written rules, but they're part of the organizational culture. Do we call the boss by first name, or do we call him by or her by their last name? Do we say sir or ma'am? These are all part of the organizational culture of an organization, and it varies from one company to another company. Generally speaking, what I've seen is IT companies have got relatively more relaxed sort of a culture when it comes to clothing, when it comes to using the titles of people, et cetera, et cetera. So they'll use first names. They will not use formal dressing. The communication will be much more informal. In contrast, banks, they've got a much more formalized culture. Anywhere in the world you go, and you'll see, when you walk into a bank, the people in a bank will have suits on, business suits on. So the dressing is much more formal. The way how they communicate with each other is much. So there might be more paperwork and signatures and things of that sort. They'll be very, I guess, less reliance on informal channels like WhatsApp and other digital communication methods. Um, in terms of communicating with each other, they will use more likely to use surnames. They're more likely to call each other in a more formal way, because banks are they've got this particular type of culture, and that's generally across the board. Anywhere you go, and then you have everything in between. So in IT companies, I've seen places where you go inside the company and they've got like pool tables, and they've got playing rooms where they've got music and whatnot. People can go and take naps and they can sleep. IT companies have got this very relaxed sort of culture. Um, and then on the other extreme, like I said, the banks, you have to come in a certain point in time. You have to do things in a certain way. So it's much more formalized culture. And then we have everything in between those things. What sort of a organizational culture would you have at your organization, Alia?
Well, maybe to follow the standards of dress, maybe uh to the patterns of behavior would be like to be on time, to make sure they teach the syllabus, and to make sure they provide notes and um like to finish the syllabus on time and things like that. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So it's a, I guess, a mixture between like formal and sort of informal culture,
Yes.
but the emphasis is on making sure the learning is complete. All the learning outcomes are achieved, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. Um, Usually, the organizational culture, um, most organizational cultures are often, they're resistant to change. They don't want to change the way how they do things. And that could be a strength, it could be a weakness also. Um, so if you're in the IT industry and you are doing a lot of, because the IT, generally speaking, anywhere in the world you go, they're somehow they got this very casual, relaxed sort of environment. And I worked in an IT company for about 5 years myself, and I think I was the only one who's wearing suits and ties in the company because I was the marketing person. I was going out and meeting clients and making presentations and things of that sort. So I had to dress formally. But everyone else in the company, we had guys who come up to work in shorts and t-shirts, no problem, because their performance was measured on the basis of are they developing those programs or the software or the apps and things of that sort. So that's how we measured their performance. So it's a very relaxed sort of a thing. Then we had a gaming day, basically on Friday after lunch. We didn't really work, and the whole company would come and they'd have like these gaming competitions, so computer games, and we would put some of them up on the projectors and stuff, and so the whole afternoon they just spend on playing computer games, which is just that's the culture in the IT company. Um, Similarly, our senior management, so the CEO and the four directors, um, our meetings, we had the most unusual meetings. So what we would do is one afternoon, let's say like a Tuesday afternoon or something, we would go on a trek or a walk or a hike or something. And as we're hiking up this mountain or hill or something, or we're walking through the forest, it is at that time we're talking about the company and its strategy and vision, mission, and all that type of stuff. Okay, so that was very interesting. Working the IT company, very very different sort of a culture. Changing that would be very different. But you know what? It's those type of things that actually worked well with for the company. So IT companies, generally, uh, they've got this very relaxed sort of atmosphere, and usually the people who work in those companies, they appreciate or they like this sort of working environment. I think everybody would have hated it if we asked them to come to work with suit and tie. It just wouldn't have worked. Um, so yeah, when you look at IT companies, they've got this very different sort of culture. And generally speaking, the IT or the high-tech IT skilled workers, that's the way how they like to work. And because of the environment that this company I was working with had, we were able to attract more skilled people to our organization. Why? Because I don't know. This is somehow it's a built-in thing with IT programmers and workers. They like this sort of informal culture, and they may be more creative when they're in this sort of environment. So that was the culture at this one particular IT firm that I work with. Um, so how do we integrate strategy and culture? Well, we looked at the values of the people in the company. We want to look at the values, the beliefs, the rites, the rituals, myths, the symbols associated, who are the heroes, who are the legends, etc., etc. And all of these things, we can kind of merge them, and sometimes we can use these for marketing purposes. So if you look at KFC, right, what does KFC do? KFC has used, this myth, this story, the legend of the guy who went to like 100 stores before his chicken was his chicken recipe was accepted. But they've taken that story and they've created a whole marketing campaign out of it. Same thing with McDonald's. You got this Ronald McDonald character, right? And they've created this whole story around McDonald's. What about Haagen-Dazs? You guys, have you heard of Haagen-Dazs, the ice cream company?
Yes, we have a branch in Trinidad.
Okay, so when you talk about Haagen-Dazs, it sounds very European, doesn't it? By the name.
Yeah.
Interestingly, it is not European. It's an American company based out of New York or something. And what did they do? They created this fake persona for this brand. Just so that's kind of like a myth sort of factor that which they incorporate into their marketing and branding and stuff. Sometimes real values can be incorporated into our marketing strategies. So if you got like honest workers, honesty is like the key factor. You can take that and then you can market it, and you can create a whole marketing campaign or strategy out of it. So you really have to look at what are those things that go around in the organization, and how can we take these things for our benefit, for the benefit of the organization that we are talking about. So again, you have to really study the organization in detail to find out, what is it, what are the values, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, and how can those, values, strengths, and weaknesses impact the company. Obviously, we want to focus on the strengths and try to overcome the weaknesses if there are weaknesses in any of these things here. So sometimes the organizational culture can inhibit strategic management. For example, you could miss external changes due to the strong held beliefs. So, we've got big IT companies like Nokia and Motorola. These are examples of companies who refuse to change. And because they refuse to change, the external environment, they changed so rapidly, these companies kind of went broke. Sometimes you have a natural tendency to hold the course, even during the times of strategic change. So the world around you could be changing, but you're like, no, we're going to stick to our ways. And sometimes sticking to your ways is actually good. In other times, sticking to your ways is not so good. So during this whole Corona pandemic, we saw a lot of companies who were like, you know what? No, we're going to stick to our ways. We're going to make people come to work. And consequently, what's happened is, especially in the West, in the US and the UK and many other European countries, there's a mass exodus of employees. Employees are quitting companies by the droves. They're saying, you know what, we don't want to work in companies that want us to come to the physical office anymore. So the world has changed, but those companies that stick to that thing, you know what, yeah, we're going to do it physically, they're not really faring too well. So sometimes the organizational culture can limit us from changing with the environment. So that's the organizational culture. What about marketing? Within marketing, we have to look at different functions of marketing. Customer analysis. Are we good at customer analysis? Yes or no? Selling products and services. Is our sales team good? Yes or no? In terms of product and service planning, are we good at planning for new products and new services? Is our pricing strategy the right pricing strategy? And I'm not talking about the price itself. I'm talking about the pricing strategy. Okay. What about our distribution? Are we distributing things properly? Is it good enough? Is it capturing the whole market? Are we good at marketing research? And are we good at opportunity analysis? So all of these factors can be either strengths or they could be weaknesses for an organization. So let's look at these in a bit more detail. So when we're doing the internal analysis and we're looking at marketing, so the first thing you might want to look at is the customer analysis. So is our company doing customer service surveys? Do we have information about consumers? Because there are changes in the way how customers they perceive things, they like things or they don't like things. Their tastes are changing. Do we have up-to-date information on that? The market position strategies, or do we have the right position strategies? Yes or no? Do we have profiles on our key customers? Sorry, yeah. So if you're, business to business, you would want to have key profiles of your top customers. If you are doing business to customer, then you'll have segments, customer segments. And you would want to make, profiles on those different consumer segments that you have. And then market segmentation strategy. How are we segmenting the market? The next thing is the finance and accounting. I'm not going to go too much into detail with this because, like I said, we have a whole course on finance accounting later on. But what I am going to do is I'm going to talk about the finance and accounting audit. So last week we talked about the external environment. This week we're talking about the internal environment. And within the internal environment, finance and accounting is one of the key factors that we need to look at. So these are some of the questions that we'd want to ask. Again, companies that I work with when I'm doing consultancy projects, helping them develop long-term strategies, I will look at some of these factors here. So number one, where is the firm financially? Strong, weak, as indicated by financial ratio analysis. So is the company, financially strong or are they weak? Can the firm raise needed short-term capital? Can, if they need money for advertising campaign or if they need money to buy more raw material, can we achieve that? Can we get that as loans or investments? Yes or no? What about long-term capital? If you want to set up a new factory or a new office or we want to start exporting to a new country, can we get that money for long-term growth? Does the firm have sufficient working capital? And a lot of small companies I see, sometimes even big companies, they struggle with working capital. Do you have working capital? Yes or no? Again, these are things we can find out through our financial analysis. And are capital budgeting procedures effective? Again, the procedures, I'm not going to go too much in detail about this right now because you have a whole course on finance later on. But these are things that we need to look at and consider. Are dividend payout policies reasonable? So are your shareholders happy with the dividends that they're getting? Does the firm have good relationship with investors and stockholders? Again, if it's a listed firm, then you have stockholders. If it's not a listed firm and if you're a partnership, then you'll have investors. And you need to keep in mind that you have to have a good relationship with them because they can then come in and if they don't like things, they can change the CEO, they can change the management of the company. Are the firm's financial managers experienced and well-trained? That's another key factor. You need to have good financial managers, and that means that they're training, so they have to have the right amount of training. So if they're accountants, they're things like ACCA and CPA and CA and so on and so forth. These are accountancy qualifications. If they're financial guys, then it could be something like a MSc or an MBA in finance. We need to ensure that these people have the right level of training, especially when they're dealing with finance because they're dealing with money. So it's important we have trained and experienced people. And finally, is the firm's debt situation excellent? I mean, are you managing your debt? Is it within reach? If you have debt, can you pay off the debt on time? Is the interest not too high for you? Is it okay for you? And so on and so forth. So these are some of the things that we'll have to look at when we're doing the internal analysis. The financial audit is very, very important. Now, you might be thinking, how does this link to marketing strategy? And let me give you an example of this, how it links to marketing strategy. So I've got a little story to go with this thing. Somewhere out in the Midwest in the US, there's these college students, these guys, 3-4 guys, they went to college. And what happened was they went to college and they came back, they got their degrees, business degrees, and they came back to their hometowns. And they're like, what should we do? And when they looked at the market, they saw that in the market, there was only one company that was selling tires. And this one company that was selling, you know, tires, let's use like I don't know, a symbol like this. Okay, yeah, let's just use this symbol. Okay, so we've got this one company right here, and this one company, they sell tires. And because it's in the Midwest, there's lots of farms and stuff. Um, Much of the tires that are being sold are sold for farming machinery and equipment. But the problem with this company was that the tires that they were selling were, the technology was outdated and the price of tires was very high. So these 3, 4 college students, graduates, you know what, they said, let's create our own company. And what these guys did was they created their own company. And let's use this symbol of a pyramid to represent this company. And when they created their own company, what they did was, because they went to college and university, they had the latest technology, and they created a tire which was more advanced than the old company that was here. Okay, so if I can do this, we can call this old company, right? And this here was the new company, right? That was established by the college kids. Okay. Their product was better. So they had a more advanced product and they were selling it at a lower price because they kept their profit margins very low. All of a sudden, what happened? The customers, they started going from the old company to the new company, right? So the customers, they started going from these guys to these guys. So they started losing the customers. Now this old company, I don't know, they were lazy bums or whatever the reason. They were like, you know what, we don't want to reduce our prices, nor do we want to improve the quality for our product. Instead, what they did was they found out that this new company, they were financially very weak. And when they found out that they were financially very weak, what they did was they used that as their advantage. So this old company, what they did was they went out into the market, and to make tires, what's the basic raw material for making tires? Right? It's rubber, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's presume these stars are the rubber suppliers in our region. Okay, so these are the companies that are selling rubber in the region, okay, in this state region. Now, America is a huge, huge country. And, you know, if you're in the Midwest and you've got one company there, these guys, they knew that the other rubber suppliers, they're so far away, the cost of transportation would be very high. So what this old company did was they went out to all of these rubber suppliers, and they said to them, hey, look, we will buy out all of your rubber supplies for the next 1 year. Okay. They said, we'll buy out all of the rubber supplies for the next 1 year. And you cannot sell it to anybody else. Okay. So when they did that, essentially what they did was they converted all of these companies to their side. Now, they're not selling rubber to anybody else. That means there's no rubber for this new company to buy from. And because they didn't have the finances, it was going to be too costly to bring rubber in from another state. This company went bankrupt. The new company went bankrupt. So simply by knowing that, you know what, your competition, which is the new company, they did not have enough, financially they were not strong, and they could not borrow money from anybody else in the market because it's a new company. This old company was able to drive out the competition, and they were able to, you know, become the market leaders once again. So knowing that your financial position is strong, because these guys knew they have a lot of money to, in their bank, they could drive out competition, and that's what happened in this particular case. I've got another interesting story to go with this also. So Pepsi and Coke in your countries, do they sell it in glass bottles or plastic bottles or cans?
They sell it both in cans, bottles. Plastic too.
Okay. When you buy it in a glass bottle, do they keep some sort of a security deposit?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so let me give you an interesting example. This is a real life example, and the person who told me the story was the senior vice president of marketing of Pepsi. Okay, so if he told me that, I would believe him. Okay, globally, what percentage of the market does Pepsi control? Anybody know? Roughly around the world, Coca-Cola controls 60% of the market share. Okay. Now, in this particular country that we're talking about, I forget exactly what country it was, but in this particular country, we had the same situation. Okay, 40% of the market share was with Pepsi, and so it was a 40-60 sort of a market. Now, to change 1% over, if Pepsi was to gain like 1% market share, sometimes it will take 2 or 3 years. So changing market share is a very long-term process. It's not that easy. And in this particular country, they were selling glass bottles. Okay, this is before the time of the plastic bottles and the cans, right? So both companies are selling glass bottles. Now the thing with the glass bottles is the cost of production of a glass bottle is usually high. So what companies do is to ensure that those glass bottles come back, they charge a minor deposit. Let's say 5 cents. Okay. So you go buy a bottle of Pepsi or Coke, and let's say it costs 50 cents. What will happen is you will pay the company 55 cents. Once you've drunk the bottle of Coke or Pepsi, you go give the glass bottle back, and they'll give you 5 cents back. Okay. However, the cost of the glass bottle is not 5 cents. Okay. The cost of glass bottle, it might be something like 30 cents. Okay. Now the question is, why aren't they taking 30 cents from the customer? Why are they charging them only 5 cents? Pelumi, any idea?
I think it's so the customer can return the bottle. And when he returns the bottle, they give him back 5 cents. And in cases of
why not charge them 30 cents for a glass bottle?
I feel like in cases of loss, the 5 cents is something that totally losing the whole money. And then since their production is made in bulk, the 5 cents can cover up in some cases. So imagine you're supposed to produce in bulk of maybe 90 bottles, and it's supposed to be 30 cents per bottle. So if you're producing bulk, it will definitely be reduced, and maybe you lost like 10 bottles. So you already have like 50 cents from 10 bottles
Mhm.
instead of losing totally. So the amount for production in large quantities is lesser than it would be if you're producing in just single bottles.
Okay. Another thing for you to consider is this: if you're selling a bottle of Coke or Pepsi for 50 cents, and then you charge 30 cents as a deposit, that's a lot of money, right? That's like 60% of the cost of the product. And these companies feel that if they charge so much money as deposit, customers might not buy Coke or Pepsi. Instead, what these guys they know that customers are not going to keep the glass bottle. It's not really worth much to the customer. So 5 cents is that token amount that they charge to the customers, knowing that 98% of people will return the glass bottle back to them. Okay. Now Pepsi, for I think like 50 years or something in this particular market, had this 40% market share. Coke had 60% market share. All of a sudden, somehow, how I don't know, because the guy didn't tell me. I have a feeling that they might have gotten the information through maybe not so legal means, but they found out that Coca-Cola, the company was in financial trouble in this particular country. So this guy, what he did was he got his marketing team and he told them to go and buy all Coke. He gave them money and says, buy Coke. All right? That kind of sounds funny, doesn't it? Okay, so this guy, VP, okay, VP marketing of Pepsi, sends team to buy Coke bottles. Okay, so people are going out and buying Coke bottles by the truckloads, and they're bringing the Coke bottles back. And then when they bring the Coke bottles back, you know what they did with those? They simply broke the bottles. So now what's happening? Now what's happening is next month, Coca-Cola, when they're doing things, have they had significantly fewer bottles. Now, to make the bottles cost them 30 cents, right? But Pepsi just bought them for like 5 cents, literally, because that's the cost of the bottle. Pepsi had financial strength. They had money in their pocket. Okay, so Coke was cash strapped. Okay, so they didn't have much cash available for them for whatever reason. So they use their less cash on making bottles. Okay, so whatever little money they had left, they used it on making new bottles. And then guess what Pepsi did? They went and bought more bottles and they broke them. And they kept on doing it. Okay, so kept buying and so they kept buying and breaking Coke bottles until it came to a point when Coke had no more money left to make new bottles. And when they had no money left, what happened to Coke in the market? There was no Coke left in the market. Okay, and eventually what happened was this bit, it kind of changed. And Pepsi went from a 40% market share to 100% market share. All because Pepsi had bigger financial pockets. They had more money with them. And they knew that Coke was in financial trouble. They knew that nobody was going to lend them money because they're already in financial trouble. And all they did was went and bought Coke bottles and they broke them. So technically speaking, they didn't really break any laws. But I'm not sure, if there's a financial fair play law or something of that sort or not in that particular country. It's a possibility they might have had those type of laws in that country. Maybe they didn't. But just by knowing that we have more money available to us and the competition does not have money available to them, they were able to exploit that situation and they were able to take out the competition from the market. And then Coke, it took them many years to get back up on their feet and come to the market. And I think now Coke is back in that market, but still Pepsi controls 70% of the market share in that particular market. So that's where the finance comes in, why finance is important for marketing strategy. Okay, so let's move on. Next is we've got production and operations. So when we talk about production and operations, we did a case study on this also earlier. I think the first case study we did with the Coors beer, if you guys remember. So how are we, what is the processes that we use to produce our products? How much capacity do we have? What sort of inventory we have available to us? What about the workforce? Are they skilled? Are they unskilled? What is the quality of the product or the service that we're talking about? So when we talk about workforce, for example, the Italians, in general, the fashion market, they are, I guess, blessed with workers who are quite experienced because they're people, people who are working in factories in Italy, the Italians have been doing this for thousands of years, making leather goods, all the way back to the times of the Romans, and perhaps even before that. So the Italians are very good at making leather stuff, whether they're shoes or jackets or handbags, and so on and so forth. So consequently, Italian companies know they have the best, workforce available to them. In contrast, if you look at one of the BRIC countries, India. India is not so good at making leather stuff. Why? Because traditionally in India, people don't eat cows. And because they don't eat cows, they don't have leather. And because they don't have leather, they have not been making leather type of things for too long. It is only recently that they become more capitalistic. They are now importing leather, raw leather from other countries because it's still illegal to kill cows in many parts of India. So they don't have enough leather available with them. So they import raw leather and now they're making things out of leather. But guess what? They don't have the workforce who knows how to deal with leather, how to make leather things. In contrast, Italy, thousands of years, they've been doing this. So that becomes their strength for the Italians. In India, although the cost of workforce is cheaper, because they're not experienced at making these things, it becomes a weakness. Another example I have is with when we look at these camera lenses. So even on your mobile phones and things of that sort, the lenses for the cameras, whether you're buying a Samsung or Apple or whatever, those lenses are made by specialist companies. And often those companies are based out of Germany or Japan. So the two countries really who are very good at making camera lenses, either Germans or the Japanese. And it doesn't matter whether you're in the American companies in like Apple or your South Korean companies like Samsung, you buy those lenses from either the Germans or the Japanese. Why? Because these are the people who have mastered that quality. Okay? So if you want the best quality lenses, you will either go to the Germans or you'll go to the Japanese for the best quality lenses camera lenses in the world. So that can become, sometimes it becomes our strength, sometimes it's a weakness for us. A third example I have for this is if you look at wristwatches. So the best wristwatches in the world are made in Switzerland. Why? Again, it's about the processes that they follow, the capacity that they have to make those wristwatches. It's also about their workforce, because these are people who are highly skilled. They've been doing it for hundreds of years. They're making watches, and the quality of the workmanship is second to none. So if you want to buy a good wristwatch, you would want to buy a wristwatch that says Swiss made on it. There's a company called Guess. You guys have heard of this company, Guess?
Yes.
Okay, so Guess makes watches. And if you go to a Guess store, or if you go to their website, you've got two types of watches that they sell. Okay, there's the normal Guess watches, and then there's something called Guess Collection. Okay, or in short, it's called GC. Okay, let me just this. Okay. Now, the watches, you can go to their store and you can find watches there, and you can find two identical watches. Okay, literally two identical watches. And one watch that will be made by just the normal Guess, they sell their watches, from I think like $50 going up to I think $200 for the top watch that you can buy. The GC ones, on the other hand, are very differently priced. The GC ones, they will start at I think about $350, and they go up to like I think $1,200. Now, what's the difference? Any idea? So these watches are made in China. And where would you presume these watches are made in? And these watches are Swiss made. The GC watches are Swiss made. So because the quality and the workmanship of the Swiss watches is so good, the same company sells two watches which are almost identical, but they can charge 6 times more money, right? 6, 5, whatever. My maths is not so good, right? So if the top watch here is $200 and the top watch here is $1,200, that's a lot of money. You're charging an extra $1,000. Why? Because that watch is Swiss made. But the customers who buy those GC watches, they know that they're going to get better quality. The workmanship is going to be amazing. It's going to last longer. Things are not going to break down in it. Why? Because the Swiss have been making these watches for the last, I don't know, 1,000 years or so. Okay, so that's where the production operations come in. And Guess, even though it's an American brand, okay, they have been able to create this special brand out of this. And they say, you know what? We'll make these watches in Switzerland. And because these watches are made in Switzerland, we'll charge more money for it. And we can charge more money because people will pay more money for those products. So again, the production can be a strength and it can be a weakness for us as well. So we have to look at that and see how it works to our favor or it does not work to our favor. Some of the things we want to look at in terms of production and operations are suppliers of materials, parts, etc. reliable and reasonable? Are facilities, equipment, and machinery and offices in good condition? Are inventory control policies and procedures effective or not? Other things we want to look at when we're looking at production operations are things like the quality control policies and procedures effective? Now we talked about the lenses. Why are the lenses in Germany and Japan so good? Because they've got such good quality control processes and procedures, besides their research and technical abilities. So the facilities, resources, they are quite strong in both of these countries. Does the firm have technological competencies? So on and so forth. Again, when we look at another one area, the screen of a mobile phone or a TV, I think that the 3 companies in the whole world that make these screens. So whether you're buying an Apple or a Samsung or Huawei or any other phone, the screen will come from one of the 3 companies that are out there in the world that make the screens, really. Next bit is about research and development. Are we good at R&D? You know, are we making new products before the competitors are making the new products? Are we improving the quality of our products? Yes or no? So these are all related to R&D. And then again, this could be a strength or it could be a weakness for our organization. So we saw this during the pandemic. There are a few companies that were able to make those vaccines before everybody else. So we saw Pfizer and BioNTech and Moderna, some of the companies that came up with these COVID-19 vaccines before other companies in the marketplace. Why? Because their R&D facilities were appropriate for making vaccines of that nature. Sometimes you can outsource your R&D. Sometimes you can get other companies to do it for you. You know, it's not necessary that every company will have the well-qualified R&D personnel. So it makes better sense to get an external research company to come and help you out with these sort of things. And R&D is also linked to the MIS and the computer systems. They say MIS, but in this day and age, there's new technical terms which we are using, such as big data. That is one of the key factors that helps companies do research and development. Artificial intelligence. So these are the key things that we look at in today's day and age. Are we good at these things? Yes or no? If not, maybe it's a good idea to get somebody else to help us you know, in these areas. So MIS is, again, the same thing, is management information systems. And the purpose is to improve performance of an enterprise by improving the quality of managerial decisions. So what MIS really does is it helps us make better decisions and helps us make better strategies for the long term. Are the managers using the right information systems? Is there a CIO, Chief Information Officer, or a director for information systems in the company? Usually the big firms, multinationals, they all have these things. Is the data regularly updated? Yes or no? Because consumer trends and things are changing. Do we have the up-to-date data available to us? Yes or no? Do managers from all functions areas contribute input to the information system? So we need information from all functional areas, from finance, from accounting, from HR, from marketing. All that information needs to go in for us to make the best decisions. So are they effective passwords? Instead of saying passwords, we can say effective security protocols. Because there's a lot of hacking and stuff going on in this day and age. So we want to ensure that our data is safe and nobody can hack into it. So that's about it in terms of the internal factor analysis, right? So when we talk about the internal audit, there are key areas that we look at, and we want to see whether these things are a strength for our company or they're a weakness for our company. If they're a strength, we see how can we use that strength and beat our competitors. If they're a weakness, then we have to work on reducing or minimizing that weakness. And so when we're developing strategies, we have to keep this in mind. Does all of this make sense, guys?
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so the last bit is um, mm, so how do we develop the strategy? Okay, so in the external analysis, we looked at the pest analysis, the political, environment, social, technological. We looked at the um, opportunities and threats. Oh, I misspelled opportunities. Okay, and then in this last stage, we looked at the strengths and weaknesses, right, of a firm. So what we want to do really is we want to exploit those opportunities. We want to exploit the opportunities using our strengths. So what are the opportunities available in the market? What are the opportunities available in terms of political opportunities, economic, social, technological, or generally in your marketplace that we can exploit using our strengths? So maybe we're strong in terms of brand image, maybe we're strong in terms of our supply chain, maybe we're strong in terms of our finances. How can we use our strengths to exploit those opportunities? Um, how can we deal with threats using our strengths? Okay, so again, threats could be in terms of competitors. Threats could be in terms of, um, you know, changing in the taste of the customers, et cetera, et cetera. So whatever the threats are, how can we, deal with those threats using our strengths of the company? And finally, how can we minimize our weaknesses? Now, that can be done, again, maybe using strengths, or it could be through other opportunities, such as external opportunities. Maybe there are investors in the market, and you can use investors to come and help you to minimize your weaknesses. Or it could be something in the environment, like government regulations. And maybe you can get help from the government. So when we had the financial crisis, the banks all went to the government to get bailouts, right? So that kind of falls under the pest sort of thing. Okay, so how can we minimize our weaknesses? So that's basically when we're developing strategies, we have to keep in mind these three key things. Obviously, you can come up with other permutations and combinations of these, but these are the three key things that you need to keep in mind when we're talking about minimizing our weaknesses. How can we deal with the threats using our strengths, and how can we exploit the opportunities, again, using our strengths? Does this make sense? Are there any questions on any of this?
No.
Okay, Palumi, all good?
Yes, it's all good.
Okay, and Debbie, are you here with us? School run? Okay, so what I'll do is I'll convert this and I'll share this slide with you guys. Just give me a sec. I'm just gonna do this now before I forget. Okay, and okay, so then I've got the last bit here to share with you guys. This is about actually developing the strategies. So strategy analysis and choice. When we're actually developing strategies for our organization or any organization, how do we do that? It's actually subjective decisions are made on objective information. Our goal is to, first of all, develop alternative strategies. What are the possible strategies we can have? And then to look at those alternatives and to measure to see which alternative is the best one. And then out of those best, we want to select appropriate strategies to pursue for the long term. And that strategy that we choose will be based on the vision, the mission, objectives, the external audit, and the internal audit. So those are some of the things that we look at when we develop a strategy and choose an appropriate strategy. So the first step is to generate alternatives. Okay? How do we generate alternatives? What you want to do is you want to have people participate in this, usually managers in the company to participate in this, in generating alternative strategies. So as many different departments, as many people as you possibly can. It's not necessarily just the CEOs of the company who should sit there and do this, or marketing directors, but you want to get as many people as possible to sit down and help in developing those alternatives. Okay. Now there are certain strategies, they're frameworks that we will talk about today. And I think we can probably finish before the end of the class. These are certain matrices and stuff that are important that we want to use. And these are the things that we will use to develop strategies. So there are a number of matrices. In the input stage, there's an EFE matrix, there's an IFE and CPM matrix. In the stage 2, there's the SWOT, SPACE, BCG, IE, and GRAND matrix. And then finally, we have the QSPM, which is the decision stage. So let's go through each of these one by one. I'm just gonna jump to the strategy formulation framework. So the stage 1 is the input stage where we are getting information, okay? And step 1 is the external factor evaluation matrix, or the EFE. Step 2 is to look at the internal factor evaluation, IFE. And then number 3 is to look at the competitive profile matrix. Now we've done this over the last 2 classes, so it'll be easy for you to look at this. In stage 2, we want to match between the organization's internal resources and skills and the opportunities and risks created by the external factors. So the external factor evaluation, remember we did that earlier. What are the external factors that impact our organization? Today, we just talked about the internal factor evaluation. What are the strengths and weaknesses of a company? And again, earlier, we talked about the competitive profile matrix. What is the competition like? And the Porter 5 forces can be one of the things that go into this. So once we have all of this information, then we move on to the next thing. So we talked about the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. So it's basically picking information from the IFE and the EFE, right? External factor evaluation and the internal factor evaluation. Okay, the external and internal. And we're coming up with something called the SWOT matrix. We've talked about the SWOT matrix earlier, have we? So
Yes, we
essentially,
have.
Yes.
yeah, essentially what we're doing is, if you want to go in detail with this thing, okay, we talked about, short while ago, how you can use the strengths to exploit opportunities. Okay, so SO strategies use the firm's internal strengths to take advantage of external opportunities. WO strategies improve internal weaknesses by taking advantage of external opportunities. And we talked about that briefly. Those external opportunities don't necessarily have to be in the marketplace. It could be government strategies or something of that sort. STR strategies use the firm's strengths to avoid or reduce impact of external threats. And WT, this is a new one now. Strategies, defensive tactics aimed at reducing internal weaknesses and avoiding external threats. So this is the additional bit here. How can we reduce our internal weaknesses and or avoid external threats? What are the things that we can do to avoid those external threats? So that's the SWOT matrix right there, SWOT matrix. The stage 2 is about, one, we could use a SWOT matrix. Number 2, we could use something called a SPACE matrix. And what is a SPACE matrix? Basically, SPACE stands for Strategic Position and Action Evaluation. That's what SPACE stands for. Strategic Position and Action Evaluation, SPACE matrix. SPACE matrix has 4 quadrants. Framework indicates whether aggressive, conservative, defensive, or competitive strategies are the most appropriate for a given organization. Okay. So what sort of competitive strategies should we be adopting? Should we go for aggressive strategies? Should we go for conservative, defensive, or competitive strategies for an organization? Its axis represents 2 internal dimensions, the financial strengths and the competitive advantages. So the FS and the CA. And the 2 external dimensions are environmental stability and industry strengths. So basically the 3 things that we gathered initially, right? This bit that we gathered initially. External factors, we looked at the internal factors, and we looked at the competitive profile matrix. These ones are using that information in a very different way. The SWOT analysis does it slightly differently. The SPACE matrix is looking at the same information, but in a slightly different way. Okay, and the SPACE matrix essentially what it does is creates a matrix which looks like this. Can you guys see this? Is it legible?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe if I make it slightly bigger, I don't know if that's going to help. Okay,
Yeah.
so in the SPACE matrix, we are looking at 4 quadrants here. And quadrant 1 is aggressive strategies. Aggressive strategies could include backward, forward, or horizontal integration. And what does that mean? Backward integration means to buy out your suppliers, or you start doing the supply sort of things. So Apple is doing backward integration. How so? Apple is now making the processor for the computer laptops and the mobile phones now. In the past, they used to buy those processors from companies like Intel, but now they've got money, they have got financial stability, so they're very high on the financial score here. So they're like, hey, we got the money, we've got the intellectual properties available, we've got the resources. Why don't we make our own processors? So they're going out for backward integration. Forward integration means the supply side of things, buying out your distributors or the retail outlets, so on and so forth. And horizontal side of integration could mean buying out other processes, such as the company that does advertising for you. So instead of you hiring an external company to do advertising for you, you create your own advertising department. Instead of hiring an accountancy firm for you, you go and set up your own accountancy department. So that's horizontal integration. It could be market penetration, market development, product development, and diversification. So market penetration means to go out and sell more of your products to your existing marketplace. And we'll talk about that a bit later in one of the other matrices. Market development means to go out and develop new markets. Product development means to go out and develop new products. And diversification means to go out and do something different. So if you're making, I don't know, so if you're Google, for example, and you're doing search engines, and now Google is making cars, self-driving cars. So that's diversification. They're going in a very different sort of a marketplace. So those are the aggressive strategies that we could adopt. Then on the totally opposite side, you've got defensive strategies, which is opposite. Retrenchment. Retrenchment means retrenchment, liquid divestiture, and liquidation. That basically means you're getting rid of things. So you could get rid of things in your supply side, you could get rid of things in your production side, you could get rid of certain products, you could get rid of brands, you can sell them or you could just close them. So that's the total opposite of the aggressive strategies that we're talking about. Then on the upper left is the conservative strategies. In the conservative strategies, you could do market penetration. That is to go out and sell more of your products to the existing customers. You could go market development, develop new markets to sell your products to, product development, or related diversification. So the related diversification means similar type of things. So if you are Google and you're doing search engines, then you start doing email, which is similar stuff because you're in the same IT industry and you're doing things related to the web. And you're doing the cloud storage. Again, it's related diversification. On the other side of this is the competitive side. In the competitive, you could do the same things as the aggressive, backward, forward, horizontal integration. But the only thing that is missing in this is the diversification. You're trying to compete more with the marketplace, but without going into diversification of your products. And how do you do this? There are 4 things that we look at: FP, SP, IP, and CP. And what are those things? FP is financial position. CP is your competitive position. EP is the environmental position, and IP is the industrial position. So we essentially select a set of variables that define our financial, our competitive, our environmental, and our industry positions. And we assign a numerical value from 1 to 6 for each of these factors, -1 to -6 for the environmental and the industrial, the competitive positions. So if the competition is tough, very tough, we will be on a -6 scale. If the competition is not so tough, then on the CA scale will be maybe on a -1. If the environment in general is not so strict, will be on like a -1 scale. But if environment is very tough for you, then you'll be on an extreme -6 scale. Similarly, if you're financially very strong, you'll be on a +6 scale. Financially weak, you're on a +1 scale. And in terms of your industry position, the IS, if you're doing well, you have a big market share, you are the leader in the pack, you'll be a +6 in the market industry position. If you don't have a big market share, you're not doing so well, then perhaps you'll be a +1 for in this scale. So that's how they compete these. Financial position, stronger financial position, +6. Not so strong financial position, +1, or you could be a 0 even. In terms of competition, if the competition is tough, -6, -7. If the competition isn't so tough, it's a -1. The industry position is again similar, and your SP, which was for, sorry, this written this wrong. It shouldn't be SP here. Books, sometimes, these guys can make mistakes in this. That should be the environmental position, EP here. Let me correct this. So the environment is tough. You got lots of competitors out there. You'll go down towards -7, -6. If there are not so many competitors, you're on the minus side. Again, you look at a number of factors when you talk about the environment. It could be competition, it could be the government, it could be the customers, and so on and so forth. So this is called the space matrix. This is another matrix that you could use when we are creating our strategies for the long term. Then we've got another matrix called the BCG matrix. BCG matrix is again, a popular matrix that is used for developing strategies. Again, what the BCG matrix does is it helps multi-divisional firms formulate strategies. So if you're a big company and you've got lots of divisions, you would use something called a BCG matrix. It geographically or graphically, portrays differences among divisions in terms of market share, position, and industry growth rate. So we're looking at two things here, really. And let me just jump down to the BCG matrix so it helps you understand what we're looking at. So number one, we're looking at the market share. And number two is your growth, how fast you're growing. So when we have a new company, okay, which would be in the question mark phase here in the top right-hand box. New product, you've just launched it. The sales are growing, but you don't have a big market share. You would be called a question mark, okay? Because your market share is relatively small. So small market share. I don't know if I can draw this here. If I can do it quickly, I will. Otherwise, okay. So in this case, let's presume that 7% is our company. Okay, that's a small market share here. Okay, so we've got a small market share. When we have a small market share, we would be, in terms of market share, we'll be on the lower side here, okay? But because we are a new product, we're growing fast. So we would call it a question mark. We call it a question mark because we don't know where we're going to end up. Whether this company is going to, or this product is going to continue growing, or is it going to fizzle out? It happens. When this product continues growing, and let's say, you capture a big percentage of market share. Let's say you have gone up to the 35% of the market share here. Then you're a star. You're growing fast and you have a big market share. So at this point in time, the iPhone can be considered as a star product for Apple. Why? Because they have a big market share and it's growing. I think just recently, the new statistics came out for Apple and they said they've done much better in terms of sales and profit than they were expecting. So that's a star product for Apple. It's growing and it's got a big market share. The stars, eventually what happens is when the growth rate kind of fizzles out, and when the growth fizzles out, you still have a big market share, but you're not growing anymore. Then you become what is called a cash cow. So for example, the iPads for Apple would be a cash cow. The iPads or the tablets are a product which they have a big market share of, but they're not growing anymore. The market for the iPads is not growing, and people who have the tablets, they aren't switching from other brands to Apple. So they're relatively stable. They're called a cash cow. Now, the danger of being in a cash cow is that if you're a cash cow, your market share could start slipping downwards, and you could start losing your market share. People will stop buying your product. And then you become a dog. That's the quadrant number 4 here. So market share is going down and your product is not selling. You are now your product or your company is now a dog. Okay. Now, there are different strategies that we can adopt for each of these 4 quadrants. If you are a question mark, you don't know what's going to happen with your company. You don't know what's going to happen with the brand. So at this point in time, you could do a number of things. You could divest the brand. You could sell off this company, this brand to somebody else. Or you can work on product development, come up with new products to sell in the marketplace. You could possibly go out for market development, whereas you try to sell your product to other markets, in other countries maybe, or to other age groups, or try to sell it as a different use. Or you could go for market penetration, as in invest more in advertising and branding and try to sell more of your products so that you gain a bigger market share. So if you're a question mark, you realize your company or your brand is in the question mark state, these are some of the strategies that you could go for. If you are a star, what do you do? Now, if you're a star, you could go for backward, forward, or horizontal integration. Again, Apple is doing that. You know, the iPhones are star products. So what are they doing? They go for backward integration. They're making the processors themselves. You could go for market penetration, market development, product development. Again, this is quite similar to what we talked about earlier. If you're a cash cow, you know, what to do there? You don't know whether your company, your product is going to grow or not. So one thing you could do is product development. Bring in innovations, make your product better than competitors. And Apple has been trying to do that with their iPads, if you look at it. They've come up with the bigger screen iPads, and they're doing new things with the iPads. So they're trying to make the product more exciting, find new uses for the product. You could divest, retrench. I mean, these are some of the strategies. If you are a cash cow, you could potentially do that. Now, what do you do if you're a dog? A dog is a product which has got very little market share, and it's not growing. In fact, the market share is going down. Your sales are going down. And Apple had that with the iPods. Remember the iPods? I don't know if you guys ever had an iPod.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had an iPod too. I think I threw it away eventually because there was no use for it, right? So Apple eventually, what they did was they closed down the iPod unit. They no longer make iPods. Okay, so if you were to do this based on Apple as a company, the watches could be a question mark. Right? Because it's a new product, it's growing. There's not too many. It doesn't have a big market share. Not too many people have Apple Watches at the moment, right? So it's a question mark. This could go either way for Apple. In terms of a star, most certainly the iPhone is a star for Apple, right? This is one of the products that we look at. Okay. In terms of the cash cows, the iPads iPad is essentially cash cow. They have a big market share. It's not really growing that market too much. And the dog was the iPods, which they have closed off. right? So they no longer make iPods anymore. That division has been closed. So they went for the retrenchment strategy. No more iPods in the marketplace. Okay. Now, it's not necessary a product or a company will be so clear. It will be in one quadrant specifically. It might kind of be like, in between quadrants. It's a possibility that might happen. It might be more on this side or this side of one quadrant. Okay, it's a possibility. So if the market share is higher, then the Apple Watch will be perhaps a bit more closer to the star side of things. If the market share is lower, then it might be here. If the sales growth rate is a bit slower, then it will move down this bit. If the sales growth is lower and you have a bigger market share, then it might be a bit somewhere around here. So we could be anywhere in this quadrant, really. And what we want to do is we want to figure out where we are. And based on where we are, we choose the different marketing strategies to adopt. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, again, the information we're getting for this is the same information that we got, the last two things that we did was, the internal and the external analysis. And that's, basically all of those things that we did, the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, the threats. We looked at the market, we looked at the competition, we looked at the political, economic, social, technological environments. Those are the key things. That is the information that we use for coming up with each of these matrices. Okay, so it will depend. It depends on you which matrix or matrices that you use. You don't have to use all of these matrices for devising strategies. You might just say, you know what, I'll use the SWOT matrix and I'll use the BCG matrix, and that's it to develop a strategy. Maybe you'll just say, you know what, I only need the space matrix. I don't need anything else to create a strategy for my organization. Maybe you'll use a mixture of 2 or 3 of these matrices. Okay, it's very rare that a company will use all of these to develop a strategy. Okay, so it really depends on what type of company you're in, what sort of situation that company's in, and then you devise what matrix you use. It's possible Apple only uses the BCG matrix, and based on the BCG matrix, they will devise strategies for the long term. It's a possibility. We don't know that. Okay, so yes, you can rely on one particular matrix, or you can use a mixture of 2 or 3 or more matrices. It all depends on how you want to do things. Next, we've got the IE matrix. It's another matrix. It is the internal external matrix. Positions and organization various divisions in a 9-cell display. It's similar to BCG, except the IE matrix requires more information, and strategic implications of each matrix are slightly different. So basically, we're taking the BCG and we're making it more detailed here. Okay, I'm not going to go into too much detail with this one for you guys, because it is the same thing as the BCG. It's just in a lot more detail, and the different quadrants, have slightly different strategies that they have decided to go for. In fact, the BCG is one of the most popular ones out there in the market. So if you get the BCG right, because a lot of companies use the BCG matrix, a lot of consulting companies use the BCG matrix. In fact, this was developed by a company called the Boston Consulting Group. Boston Consulting Group is one of the most famous consulting companies in the world today. So these guys tend to use the BCG matrix. The IE matrix is the same thing, just a bit more complicated, a bit more information. So you can, use this if you want to, but my recommendation would be to stick to the BCG matrix for the time being. And then finally, there's some called the Grand Strategy Matrix, tools for formulating alternative strategies, and they're based on 2 dimensions: competitive position and market growth. And we're looking at, how good is our competitive position, versus how good is the market growth. And again, they've done the same thing as the BCG matrix, but they've used slightly different things here. So the BCG looks at the market share and the growth. Here we're looking at our competitive position and the market growth. So again, based on that, you can pick a strategy. Once again, BCG is really the most popular one. I think that is one that you guys should focus on when you're doing your assignment and when you're looking at your companies. When I do my consultancy, I tend to use the BCG matrix a lot more. In fact, the two matrices I rely on the most are the SWOT and the BCG matrices. Those are the most commonly used. The big companies I work with, Fortune 500 companies like Microsoft, big banks, HSBC, Barclays, et cetera, Emirates Airlines, big travel agencies, they generally, 99% of them rely on these two matrices, the BCG matrix and the SWOT analysis. Those are the two most commonly used ones. But I think it was important for us to look at all of the matrices to give you an overview of what's out there in the market and what can you use if you want to develop strategies. For your assignment, I would recommend just focus on one matrix, if you want to. And I'll pass on the assignment to you guys probably by Monday. It's just being validated by an external. And once that comes through, I'll forward the assignment to you guys, the last assignment. Finally, there's a quantitative strategic planning matrix. You can have a look at this. I'm not going to go to this in detail, but this is more related to, you assign weights and then you give strategies. Again, like I said, the companies I've worked with, and these are some of the big companies on the planet today: Microsoft, Emirates Airlines, HSBC, Barclays banks. They focus on the SWOT and the BCG matrices. Any questions?
None from my end, but are we going to get this slide?
Yes, I will share all of these slides with you guys in a short while.
No questions.
Okay, ladies, so in terms of the coursework, we have pretty much covered all of the coursework that we had to cover. The only thing that we didn't perhaps go too much in detail was the case studies. And I guess with the case studies, it's just not as exciting when you have only 2 or 3 people doing case studies. It's a lot more funner when you have more people. Generally speaking, we've got classes of 40 plus when we do these. So that's why I kind of like cut back on the case studies and I focused more on the theory and the coursework. So that concludes our course for this term. Are there any questions about anything we've done overall?
What type of assignment it would be the next assignment?
Okay, so essentially what you have to do is you will have to apply the concepts of what we've done in these last 2 sessions, and you have to apply it to a company of your choice. So most likely, I mean, the way how it works is I have sent in the assignment, and the assignment is going to be validated by another professor. But the way how I designed the assignment was I said, why don't you apply the concepts that you've learned and apply it to your company? And so Alia, you've got your own company. Pelumi, where was it that you said you were working?
It's a Life Foundation. It's an end
Yeah,
to-
so you can apply it, these concepts to your own company, because it's going to be a lot easier for you to do this. So the idea is to do the internal analysis, the external analysis for your companies. And then based on the internal external analysis, you have to develop a strategy for your company. And to develop the strategy, you will have to use one of these matrices that we talked about today: SWOT, SPACE, BCG, IE, or grand strategy. So if you have a small company, Alia, then you might want to go for a SWOT matrix. If you have a bigger company which has got lots of products, maybe big divisions, then you might want to go for a BCG matrix, right? So it all depends on what type of company you have and what sort of matrix you decide to go for.
Okay.
So what we'll do is I'll wait for the assignment to come through. So once again, the way how the system works in the UK, the British education system, is that when we make an assignment, we have to get it validated or counter-checked by another professor. That is just to make sure that the type of assignment and assessment we're giving you is appropriate to your level. So it's an MBA level assignment. We're not asking you to do too little stuff, and we're not asking you to do too much stuff also. Keep in mind, this course had 3 assignments. If you have a course which has just 1 assignment, then obviously what they'll ask you to do will be a lot more in that 1 assignment. But because we had 3 assignments, we asked you to do about medium amount of work in those. So hopefully by Monday, I will get that approved by an external professor. Once that is approved, I'll pass on the assignment to you guys. And then what we can do is, while you're doing your assignment, if you have any questions or comments, I'm here for you guys. You can message me, and then we could just either have a Zoom session, or you can email me your assignment and I can give you some feedback on it. It's up to you. And then the next semester or the next course is going to start the week commencing the 14th of February, which is going to be, if we keep it on Fridays, then it's going to be 18th of February. It's going to be the next course that's going to start off.
What's the name of the next course?
The next course, I had one professor actually in line, but he has come down with COVID. So I'm just waiting to see if he'll recover. If he recovers, then he's going to teach the course. Otherwise, we've got a number of courses that we can do. Let me just open up the website. So either we're looking at consumer behavior, depends on the professor who's going to be available, or services marketing.
Okay, thanks.
But this whole COVID thing has really messed up everything, globally, which is a big pain, because I don't know what the situation is like now for you guys in terms of COVID. I told you like last time I got my extra Pfizer shots. And essentially what's happened is during that time, my wife is like, okay, first you get your shot and then I'll get my shot. But my wife's come down with COVID over the last 1 week or so. So thank God it's not too bad and she's recovering from it. And fortunately, I didn't get it. I think the vaccine helped. The booster shots helped me. But there's a lot of people I'm talking to and they're coming down with COVID right now. So it's like really, really spreading very fast all over. I hope all of you are okay. No COVID, anything of that sort, where you guys are at?
Well, yeah, it's really spread.